General Hospital spoilers are available for Friday, July 11, 2025. Tracy Quartermaine will likely warn Harrison Chase in the upcoming episode. Dante Falconeri confronted Brooklyn Quartermaine. Jocelyn Jacks delivers an ultimatum to Vaughn. Continue reading and let's discuss what's coming up on the ABC soap show. Laura Collins' promise. Let us begin with Lulu Spencer, who is currently unhappy with Brooklyn over Rocco Falconeri's finding. BLQ was taken aback when Lulu came over and physically attacked her. That's when BLQ understood that even though she didn't show Rocco the file, he found it anyhow. That would not have occurred if BLQ hadn't requested the material in the first place. At the same time, the lads must learn to leave adults' files alone. Lulu goes whining to her mother. Of course, the mayor says that she won't get away with it, presumably alluding to BLQ. While Lulu is coping with her mother, Dante chooses to have his own heated encounter with BLQ. However, BLQ genuinely cares about Dante as a friend and would never want him to be hurt. It's also not in BLQ's nature to harm a child, and he should understand that. Simultaneously, Rocco's relationship with both of his parents has suffered significantly. Later, Rocco takes a brave move. The boy seems to be quite interested in learning about Britt Westbourne. However, Britt has died, so I'm wondering if Rocco would contact someone else. Tracy Quartermaine's warning. General Hospital spoilers for the upcoming episode reveal Tracy warning Chase. The matriarch informs the investigator that BLQ is on the brink of calamity. Portia Robinson fumes at Curtis Ashford for not being worthy. Kai Taylor tells the truth to an enraged Trina Robinson. For Trina, loyalty is everything. So the fact that he blabbed about it and didn't inform Trina until much later could cause serious complications in their new relationship. At the same time, Kai doesn't know Drew Kane very well. So, I suppose he thought he was doing the right thing. Unfortunately, as Kai grows older, he will discover that life is full with gray areas. Anna Devane consoles Emma Scorpio Drake. Anna will also ask someone to act as her cover. She gives Vaughn an ultimatum after her breakup with Joss. Which narrative are you most looking forward to witnessing on Friday, July 11, 2025? According to General Hospital spoilers, many fans have been left to speculate following a recent close encounter between Vaughn and Jocelyn Jacks. This is when Jocelyn revealed to her WSB partner that her motivation for joining the agency was to assassinate her stepfather, Sonny Corinthos. Vaughn warned her that he too would reveal his real motive for becoming a super spy someday, leaving GH fans guessing what that purpose is. Are there any ties to Port Charles? For the most part, Vaughn remains a mystery, which could imply that he has hidden connections to someone from Port Charles, either past or present. John Jagger Cates had ties to the little community, and while he was a fan favorite when Antonio Sabato Jr. played him in the past, Cates made quite an impression during his most recent stint. Cates was a villain through and through, using his FBI credentials to return to PC and exact long overdue retribution on Sonny. He failed as Sonny shot and killed him, therefore may Vaughn have the same motivations as Joss, but from a different perspective? If Agent Cates was his known biological father, joining the WSB would allow him to follow in his footsteps. Meanwhile, approaching Port Charles and killing down Sonny would be one way to avenge his death. Could Vaughn be gunning for Sonny too? How and why did Vaughn end himself in Jocelyn's orbit? What drew him to Port Charles, and specifically the WSB headquarters? Was it pre-planned on Vaughn's end? Is he hoping to bring down Sonny? This could be why he hesitated to tell Jocelyn about his motivations for entering the super spy game. Although they are on the same page, Jocelyn may have been put off by this admission. Perhaps Vaughn is out for retribution on Sonny. Could Vaughn be Agent Cates' son? Please share your ideas in the comments section. Tune in to the ABC soap on a regular basis for all the action, and visit this site frequently for the latest General Hospital news, updates, and spoilers. Willow from General Hospital appears to be nuttier than a fruitcake, as expected. Willow's awakening in an emergency room bed following her courtroom breakdown was a watershed moment for her. Did she awaken from her zombie state with a whole new personality, or is she simply insane? We don't know yet, but we do know that her brand of craziness is driving poor Sasha out of Port Charles, which is even another point against her in our opinion. Willow has lost what's left of her mind image. ABC Willow has lost what's left of her mind image. ABC When Willow was first introduced to the GH scene, The third-grade teacher was smack dab in the middle of a baby switch story involving her own dead newborn. Willow, on the other hand, had to wait nearly 2 years to learn that her baby child had died shortly after being brought home from the hospital by his adoptive father Brad. Because Lucas assumed Willow was Wiley's biological mother, he allowed her into the baby's life, and Willow grew to love Wiley as her son. When she found that her baby had died and Brad and Nellie had switched him for Nellie's healthy son, she had an ER room outburst that devastated our hearts. This was when she still liked Willow, even loved her, because she hadn't turned into the stuck-up, vapid little priss who, in her own delusions, could never do anything wrong. She was Chase's sweet girlfriend at the time, and she had been fooled in a baby switch much like Michael. 6 years later, Willow is virtually unrecognizable, yet she is still obsessed with babies. The schoolteacher turned nurse has made a series of mistakes, and accepts no responsibility for her actions. In fact, she seemed to perceive herself as the victim in her current circumstance, ignoring the fact that she initiated the first kiss with Drew, and then proceeded to lie about it for months before initiating the second. Willow did this to herself, but she will never see it that way. Instead, she borrows Sasha's baby anytime she wants. Is it did? Or is Willow just nuts? In any case, this story must involve something other than Sasha's departure from town, correct? For some reason, Sasha believes she must flee Port Charles because someone has been creeping into her baby's room. Installing another nanny cam or increasing security on a multimillion-dollar mansion is not the solution. Taking the infant and going into concealment. What will Willow do if Sasha simply packs up and leaves town with Daisy? Her newfound lunacy must be seen through, else this is a pointless story. Willow may be nuts in other ways, but it makes more logical for her to lose her mind over children and babies since that is who she has always been. She decided to study early childhood education. She chose to place her late son for adoption to keep him safe from his cult leader father. When she found out she was pregnant with cancer, she put Amelia's life ahead of her own. She still refuses to acknowledge that she picked Drew over her children, but that is our Willow. Our Sasha is panicking after everything that has happened to her in the GH torture chamber. However, this baby stalking scenario makes no sense, and we refuse to accept that losing Sasha is only a plot point. However, we do have one question. Why is Willow nosing around Monica's house, playing games with Sasha's baby? Because she is missing her own children, even if they are in the next room. We want answers. We want Sasha to stay put. Lulu versus BLQ. And their sons Lulu and Brooklyn are at each other's throats again. Image. ABC. Lulu and Brooklyn are at each other's throats again. Image. ABC. If General Hospital is attempting to turn Lulu and Brooklyn into Carly and Nina or a modern-day Vicky and Dorian, it will never happen, even if Lulu now works for Vicky at the Banner. These two women are simply petty and wrong. The difference is that Brooklyn apologizes for her mistakes, but Lulu continues to make them. Brooklyn did a terrible thing when she looked into Rocco's background tale, and she regrets it. Lulu did a bad thing by digging into Brooklyn's teenage pregnancy history, but she doesn't feel bad about it. Sure, she apologized to Gio, but it took her weeks to even consider it. The only two individuals we truly feel sorry for here are Lulu and Brooklyn's little sons, who suddenly realize they are brothers. Rocco now realizes he is a soap opera baby, as only soap opera babies are born from stolen frozen embryos. Simply ask Philip Kyriakis over in Salem. It's a lot for Rocco to take in, but at least his impulsive teenage self is about to return Liesel Albrecht to town. Perhaps we should thank Lulu and Brooklyn after all. Their petty rivalry will at least provide the comic relief that GH has needed for the past 18 months. Sonny has spent the year dealing with his mortality and wishing for retirement, but something always comes in the way of his leisure plans. 4 years, all we've heard is Sonny's desire to protect his children, but he never seems to get it right since he wants his children in his life. However, he may be reconsidering things. Gio first addressed Sonny as Grandpa on the day Sonny told him not to come around for his own safety. Who was the man standing before us defending Tracy? We never imagined we'd see this day. Tracy may have fainted out on the floor if she had heard what Sonny told Gio. We also know Gio is not going to do what Grandpa and Great-Granny have told him, so we might as well issue a danger alert now. Who wouldn't want to offer Trina a slow clap, followed by a loud round of applause, as she urged Kai to leave the Jerome Gallery and her life? Is there something wrong with that lad that he felt ratting out Trina's parents to Drew would earn him brownie points with his girlfriend? The look of surprise on his face when Trina expressed her desire to be done with him was priceless. Trina reminded him repeatedly that Drew had done some really horrible things to her parents, but he didn't care. This naive young man couldn't see why betraying your lover was such a bad decision. Yes, Trina is upset, but Kai is no Spencer, primarily because Spencer was smarter than Kai and would have seen right through Drew. Q for you. We had a great week-long respite from Drew, but it couldn't last forever. We guess Drew just had to be in DC last week for a critical vote that will permanently alter the landscape of America, but he couldn't wait to return to Port Charles and wreak havoc on both local and national lives. Drew's interactions with Willow were as disturbing as ever, but all we wanted to do was punch Drew like a typical Jason Morgan when he joyfully threatened a man who used to be his best friend. Drew enjoys every horrific thing he does, which is why Trina did what she had to do. So 3 cheers for our girl Trina Robinson. Yes, Rick is the messiest man in the world, just as Lucas stated. However, Rick Hurst and Rebecca Herbst's connection is still as strong as it has always been, and we know Rick adores Elizabeth. He would go to any length for her, but he would still lie and keep secrets from her along his journey to the ends of the earth, because it is who Rick is. Unfortunately, Elizabeth knows this and has friend-zoned Rick. This means Rick is back to wooing Ava in his own Rick manner. But even Ava understands who Rick truly wants to be with. If he wasn't such a jerk, we'd like him to be with Elizabeth as well. But we suppose she deserves better and Jason is available, so it will never happen for Rick and Elizabeth. And that will never happen for Jason and Elizabeth. Because the audience and Elizabeth cannot have nice things. But we can have Natalia's funeral on Monday, so there's that. Until next week, Scoopers, when Port Charles bids farewell to someone no one liked anyway. Dante was never the kind to lose control easy, but this time something inside him broke. The weight of secrets, treachery, and unsaid tension had been building for weeks and had now reached a boiling point. It was not simply one occurrence. It was everything. The falsehoods, the diversions, the perpetual detour from those he cared about the most. What ruined him was not the dishonesty, but the shattered trust that resulted from it. He felt cornered, made to look foolish, and worst of all like a guy out of sync with everything he stood for. His voice, as it raised, sounded like thunder against the interrogation room's glass walls. Everyone heard it, including those who needed to. The rage was not only in his voice, it was also in his posture, the sharpness of his words and the fire in his eyes. Nobody anticipated Dante to lose his cool, but when he did, it was like witnessing a dam break. Trina went into the aftermath of his explosion, utterly oblivious of what she was getting into. She had her own fire brewing inside her, but it came from a different place. She was tired of being dismissed, of being treated as if she couldn't handle the reality or the danger that surrounded her. She'd had enough of the secrets whispered behind closed doors, the decisions made on her behalf without her permission, and the heavy-handed manner people like Curtis and Portia tried to protect her by excluding her. Trina had earned a place in every discourse and confrontation, and now with new insights about the past Spencer, and what truly happened the night of the party, she couldn't stay silent any longer. Her voice trembled with rage as she stood in the center of the room, staring down the individual she had previously trusted wholeheartedly. They didn't see it coming. They assumed she'd keep quiet, play her part, and remain the mediator. But this time Trina made it clear. She wasn't a girl in need of protecting. She was a lady who deserved the truth. Meanwhile, Tracy sat silently in the corner of the Quartermain living room, watching the storm sweep through the family. She'd witnessed it all before. Pride, betrayal, and grief. Nothing startled her anymore, and she always knew when to strike. And now, with the family broken and preoccupied, she seized her opportunity. Her warning was not loud. It was cooler, more purposeful, and sharper than the commotion around her. She grabbed Brooklyn away with that steely stare and said a few precise words that left no room for interpretation. Tracy knew what was coming. She always did. The way she spoke about Ned's judgments and the shifting alignments inside the corporation made it evident that she wasn't only looking out for herself, but also defending the family reputation. But it wasn't just business. It was personal. Tracy's tone hinted at a deeper betrayal, which Brooklyn didn't see coming. The warning was not purely for show. It was the forerunner to a reckoning. Then came Jocelyn. constantly a fighter, constantly wearing her heart on her sleeve. But this time her emotions were weaponized, concentrated and unwavering. She was tired of witnessing her loved ones suffer while standing on the sidelines. She had put a line in the sand, and this time she was challenging Dex to cross it. The ultimatum was not impulsive. It had been building for weeks as she watched him spiral, cut her off, and hold things she wasn't meant to know about. She was aware he was involved in something harmful. She sensed he was keeping something from her. She couldn't take it anymore. She told him simply and unequivocally that if he wanted to stay in her life, things needed to change. No more lies, half-truths, or pretending. It was all or nothing. The stillness between them after she spoke was deafening, yet she refused to back down. Her love for him was genuine, but so was her self-respect. And she'd rather walk away than be collateral damage in a battle he won't name. As the dust settled from each argument, Port Charles felt different, off balance, heavier somehow. Everyone had said too much, not enough, or exactly what they had been keeping hidden for too long. The atmosphere was heavy with unresolved tension, and a sense that the worst was yet to come. Dante strode out of the police building, his mouth tensed and his gaze far away. He couldn't stop wondering about what it all meant, and how his outburst had changed. Would it cost him his job, relationships, and the ability to lead with integrity? He was unsure. But he felt something had changed inside him, something he couldn't get back. Trina found herself alone after her argument, attempting to piece together what she had said and how it had been received. Her courage felt like a two-edged sword. She didn't regret speaking out, but she was concerned about the consequences. Portia had not spoken to her since. Curtis stared at her as if she had crossed a line. But she needed to be honest with herself. If telling the truth was a problem for them, perhaps the underlying issue was not what she said, but that they didn't expect her to say it. Tracy sat by the fire sipping a tumbler of scotch, watching the flames flicker like the chaos she had caused. She was aware that her statements to Brooke Lynn would have far-reaching consequences. She'd planted the seed. It was now up to her granddaughter to determine whether she would heed the warning or suffer the consequences of ignoring it. Tracy has no intention of repairing anything could break. That was not her role. She was responsible for ensuring that the damage did not spread to the rest of the family. Meanwhile, Jocelyn sat alone in her dorm room, repeatedly repeating her chat with Dex. He had not responded to her. He gazed at her with the same pain she had seen 100 times before, yet he did not struggle for her. He did not deny her words. He did not vow to change. The quiet cut worse than any argument. And now she had to decide whether to wait for him to gather his courage or go on without him. It was not a decision she wanted to make. But she couldn't continue living in limbo. Not with her future on the line. Each of them was now on a unique road. Yet they were all traveling toward the same storm. The city was preparing for something whether they realized it or not. Relationships were fracturing. Old secrets were surfacing. And the fragile trust between people was deteriorating faster than anyone could rebuild it. Dante's indignation had started a fire, but Trina's outrage, Tracy's strategic warning, and Jocelyn's emotional stance would determine how far the flames spread. In the days that followed, neither of them discussed what had transpired publicly. It lingered in glances and between discussions. Dante pushed himself back into his work, pretending that his outburst had not revealed how deeply things had gone under his skin. Trina became silent, avoiding both her parents and Spencer, attempting to strike a balance between independence and belonging. Tracy doubled down at ELQ, making unexpected moves and consolidating control behind closed doors while everyone else was busy. And Jocelyn? She waited. She gave Dex time, space, and every opportunity to respond with something, anything. But the longer she waited, the stronger her resolve became. Port Charles was no stranger to drama. But this was different. This was personal. When things turned personal, there were always casualties. The repercussions hadn't even begun, but the symptoms were there. Something significant was going to change. Perhaps it will come with a confession. Perhaps with betrayal. Perhaps the long overdue truth has now been brought to light. But whatever happened next would be defined by the decisions taken in those explosive moments. When Dante lost control, Trina allowed her voice be heard. Tracy delivered her subtle warning, and Jocelyn declared enough. They had all drawn a line in the sand, and now they waited to see who would cross it. Vaughn's narrative is significantly more complex than anyone in Port Charles ever dreamed. At first look, he appeared to be just another charming face with a government badge, a man working behind the scenes and adhering to the rules of the WSB. But beneath the calm countenance and cryptic stillness was a complexity of agendas, personal losses, and concealed identities. Vaughn wasn't just any WSB agent. His motivation for joining the elite agency was complex, stemming from a father he'd never met and a secret he'd kept hidden his whole life. He had grown up asking questions. His mother rarely mentioned the man who had fathered him. She would deflect, assuring Vaughn that it didn't matter, and that he didn't need a father to grow up strong. She raised him alone, working double shifts as a nurse and frequently returning home fatigued. Vaughn never pressed too hard for answers, feeling that the truth contained anguish she didn't want to face. But the questions remained in the back of his mind. He didn't recognize the name. He didn't recognize the man. He only had a few sketchy anecdotes, largely timelines that didn't make sense, and images that inexplicably vanished from drawers any time he came too close. As Vaughn grew older, he developed an almost obsessional curiosity. His mother accidentally slipped up and said, "You have his eyes. Just like Kate's." Vaughn had stored the name away like a clue in a detective novel, unsure if she meant it literally or metaphorically. But after her death, when her items came into his possession, he discovered a ragged envelope stashed in a souvenir box addressed to S. Kate's, FBI Field Office, Washington, D.C. Felt like a lightning bolt hit. Vaughn's instincts kicked in, and he launched a quiet inquiry of his own. Every piece of information led him to a man named John Cates, a well-known but contentious figure in federal law enforcement circles. Cates had been with the FBI for nearly 2 decades, becoming a legend in some circles and a cautionary tale in others. His work includes multiple international stings and rumored undercover operations, some of which involved the WSB. His papers were severely censored and hidden behind layers of bureaucracy, but Vaughn discovered enough in the public domain to corroborate a shocking possibility. John Cates had previously operated in the same city, while his mother was stationed at General Hospital. This discovery sparked a furor inside Vaughn. If this man was actually his father, why had he left? Why hadn't he come looking? Had Kate's mother kept the truth from him, or had he known all along and simply walked away? Vaughn needed answers, and there was only one way he could get close enough to obtain them. He had to enter the same reality. That was the moment Vaughn decided to apply for a position with the WSB. He sought proximity rather than activity or prestige. He needed access to the same circles that his putative father had once worked in. It was not an easy road. Vaughn was not given a badge solely because of his familiar name or admirable cause. He had to work hard, prove himself, and bury his personal agenda deep enough so that no one could guess his genuine motivation for joining. His superiors assumed he was simply another ambitious recruit, ready to serve international justice. What they didn't realize was that every case, mission, and sensitive document was another opportunity for Vaughn to delve into the past and unearth hidden truths. What made matters even more complicated was the developing belief that John Cates had not just disappeared from the agency. Whispers circulated through the back halls of WSB headquarters, implying that Cates had vanished under unexplained circumstances, with some believing he had gone rogue and others convinced he had been killed during a clandestine mission. The deeper Vaughn dug, the more ambiguous the story became. He discovered that Cates had been looking into corruption within the WSB, and refused to turn a blind eye. Whether that made him a hero or a traitor was up to the person telling the story. Vaughn's loyalty was questioned more than time. As he acquired access to old papers and internal briefings, he began to notice ties between Cates and persons who continued to work in the shadows of the WSB. Some of these people knew who Vaughn was. Some even hinted that they had knew his mother. One senior official, after too many drinks at an off-site meeting, leaned in close and muttered, "You're not the first Cates to dig where he shouldn't." Vaughn didn't answer right away, but his heart pounded with confirmation. The truth seemed closer than ever. When Vaughn finally gained access to a protected repository, he discovered the file that altered everything. It was labeled with a code name but cross-referenced in many operations, indicating that it belonged to John Cates. It contained mission records, letters, and a personal notebook that had been encrypted in code. Vaughn spent weeks deciphering the notes late at night in his apartment alone, unsure whether he was uncovering the past or bringing danger into his life. The notebook revealed that Kate suspected an internal treachery. He had recorded names, locations, and suspicions. And on one post, scrawled quickly in the back, were the words, "She told me she was pregnant. I had to walk away, for her safety, not mine." That phrase shattered Vaughn. All the years of rage and hatred, all the hours spent wondering why he wasn't good enough to be claimed, vanished in a flash of reality. His father didn't leave because he didn't care. He'd left to protect them. Vaughn read the entry several times, thinking what it must have been like for Cates to leave the lady he loved and the kid he would never meet. It did not eradicate the grief, but rather reframed it. Vaughn gained something he had never had before: understanding. However, with that understanding came peril. Possessing the journal means having evidence of internal corruption at the WSB. Vaughn recognized he couldn't just sit on it, or let it accumulate dust in his flat. He had to decide whether he would become the guy his father aspired to be, the one who stood up to power and risked everything, or would he hide the truth as so many others have? The decision was not easy. Vaughn has already established himself within the WSB. He had allies and friendships, but he also knew that some people within the organization would go to any length to keep the past buried. Going public meant burning bridges, losing trust, and possibly putting himself in danger, as Cates had done in the past. But Vaughn was no longer a youngster chasing shadows. He was a man on a mission, one born not of vengeance but of legacy. He began working covertly, providing information to trustworthy sources outside the agency, including reporters, watchdog groups, and a few disillusioned ex-agents who had previously worked with Cates. He kept his trail well hidden, taking care not to alert anyone within the WSB to his activities. He was aware that it was a long game with significant risks, but each step got him closer to honoring the man whose blood flowed through his veins. Vaughn eventually requested a transfer to Port Charles, stating he wanted to investigate a case with potential ties to Sonny Corinthos' previous operations. But in reality, it was a return to the beginning. He wanted to stand where his father had stood, walk the same corridors, and perhaps even speak with individuals who knew him, not just as an agent but as a man. He reunited with others from his mother's background, including a few physicians and nurses who had vague but fond memories of the mysterious federal agent who had courted her during a high-stakes inquiry. Over time, Vaughn discovered a new purpose. No longer driven only by a need for answers, he became committed to the same ideals that had cost his father so much: truth, justice, and responsibility. Vaughn remained unwavering despite the dangers of the job and the grave betrayals. With each lie he discovered, he felt closer to the man who had given him more than just his sight. He had given him courage. And while Vaughn never had the opportunity to talk with John Cates, hear his voice, or receive a letter from him, he came to realize that heritage is more than simply bloodlines. It is about the decisions we make, the truths we stand up for, and the risks we are ready to face to do what is right. Vaughn became more than just a WSB agent. He grew into a man who his father would be proud of.